first webinar, you know, we had a small group and no one really had any questions at the end of it. And I was like, okay, they'll warm up, they'll warm up. Second group, second night, last night, a little bit bigger group, got a couple of questions. Today, much bigger group and people already today who are catching up. I guess we had some latecomers and people who are catching up, watching the previous ones, started tweeting their questions and leaving comments in the comments area. So great, so exciting. Thank you so much. And if this is your first live session in the 4-session series, we're going to talk about 30 minutes tonight about a specific theme, and then we're going to open up to Q&A. When we open up to Q&A, you can ask whatever you want. If you want to follow up on some of the things I talked about in the theme, great, but you don't have to limit it to that. You can ask about whatever you want as long as it's stage hypnotism, you know? So what we're focusing on tonight is the art of stage hypnotism. We talked about the business of stage hypnotism in the first webinar. Make sure you check that out. And you can always ask follow-up questions to that. We have one more webinar tomorrow. So if you catch up on that one and you want to ask follow-up questions, you can do that. You can do it tonight if you've already caught up on it, or you could do it tomorrow. In the second webinar, we talked about the science of stage hypnotism, what's actually happening with people on stage. And that's a big thing. I tried to cram as much as I could into 30 minutes, give you a pretty comprehensive overview, but there's a lot going on. So I know naturally some of you are going to have more questions about that, and that's okay. Tonight we're going to talk about, for those of you who see the replay later, might be today, in this webinar, we're going to talk about the art, and I've got some notes over here because there's so much to talk about, and I'm so excited, the art of stage hypnotism. I think that stage hypnotism kind of gets overlooked as an art form. I think it's a little bit like people just think it's something you do, whatever, you know. There is definitely an art to stage hypnotism. It is a medium. And I think that that's a little bit underappreciated by the broader public, mostly because the broader public just doesn't understand hypnotism, period, right? Mainstream don't get it still. So I think when you're thinking about stage hypnotism, if you want to get into it maybe, I think one thing is you don't have to necessarily think of yourself as an artist, but I do think it's helpful to think of it as an art form and to think about how you would like to engage in that art form and make it work for you in a way that feels comfortable and that feels right. So let me just sort of throw some thoughts out at you. First of all, you know, I've been doing stage hypnotism since 2004. And I started out, as I told my earlier story in one of the earlier webinars, I started out with high schools, very quickly moved into colleges, eventually did some corporate stuff. You know, I've done small theaters, big theaters, independent theaters. I've done, the biggest crowd I've ever had was 1,600 people in a double-decker performing arts center. I've performed for Pepsi and Bud Light. I've performed for little, you know, regional bank offices, their holiday parties. I've done just about the majority of the kinds of venues you can have. The only things I haven't done, like I haven't headlined in Vegas, I haven't done cruise ships. There's a few, but I've done fairs, I've done campgrounds, I've done high schools and colleges and corporate events. The way that the venue affects the show matters to some extent. The bigger thing is the size, the way that the venue and the size audience sort of come together to create an energy in the room. But what I'm trying to get at here is you know, over a decade of experience in all those different kinds of venues and for all those different kinds of crowds, there is definitely an art to it. There's an art to assessing what's going on and using what you know to get the best out of those people. Because here's the thing, and I'm still fighting off this cold. I apologize if I cough and hack a little bit here and there. Let's look at like stage hypnosis versus comedy, right? I love stand-up comedy. I revere some stand-up comedians for their ability to really craft humor, right? If you're a comedian, even if you're a stand-up, you spend a lot of time writing and revising your jokes, going to a stage, delivering them, seeing how that plays out, coming back, revising them. Stage hypnotism is a little bit like that because you can work on a set and do it over and over again. But the big difference between being a stage hypnotist and being a comedian as art forms is when you're the comedian, yes, the audience might have a different energy one night to the next, but you are always the delivery system, right? You deliver the laugh, the thing that makes them laugh. As a stage hypnotist, you have to bring up these people on stage and you have to get them to do something that makes the people laugh. You have to facilitate a process that is actually funny. And you have to do that live in real time. So it's sort of like being the leader of an improv group, only they don't know they're an improv group, right? They just came to this hypnosis show and you transform them into an improv group in some ways. You do it through having the foresight of a comedian of writing out bits and skits, but you also have to have almost like the skills of a movie director to really assess the individuals you have on stage and decide, who do I want to put in this scene? How do I get the most out of this thing I want to do? And who do I tap to do that? And again, you don't have time like a movie director does to meet with his or her cast and have pre-production meetings and assessments. So you walk into the venue, it fills up with people, you do your thing, you get people up on stage who you never knew were gonna be up on stage, and right then and there, you have to assess how well they're doing hypnotically, what their potential is, and choose them for the different things that you're trying to do. Which, as we talked about yesterday on the science of hypnotism, requires simultaneously purely functional assessments of depth, right? Objective and subjective response criteria, all this stuff in real time. Meanwhile, you also have to keep everybody safe. You're always scanning and watching to try to keep everybody safe so that you don't end up having someone get hurt and you and the venue owner getting sued. And you also have to have a sense of timing. You have to have an ability to say, I know I've got 90 minutes to do this show, or 60 minutes, or 2 hours, whatever it is, but you've got a time that you're trying to work on a schedule, and you're trying to do it efficiently, and you're trying, I think you should be trying, to cram in as much fun and laughter as you can into that time frame. You don't want to go too long because you tend to lose your audience if you go too long. You don't want to be too short because then they'll feel like they got, shafted kind of, right? So you're trying to manage not just the overall time frame, every bit. If I let a bit that normally should take about 7 minutes go 10, that 3 minutes can make a big difference. Maybe it doesn't sometimes. If I let the 7 minute bit go 12 minutes, I have probably let it lose its energy and dragged out its momentum, and it's just not as fun. And you get a sense of these things as you perform over and over and over again. But again, unlike if you're a musician, you write your song, you rehearse your song, you play it. You judge how the audience reacts to it, how it feels to play it live in front of people, or to record it in a studio and run it by other people. And then you get to revise it and do it over again. As a stage hypnotist, you don't get to do that. You plan it to the best of your ability, then you take these strangers and you put them on stage and you do it with them. And the way that they do it in that particular time may be the only time it ever turns out the way that it turned out then. And you could go and do it the next night, and it could be really quite different. This, I think, is part of what makes the profession exhilarating to me, is that I can do a bit that I've been doing for years and still get surprised by how it turns out on any given night with any given person. It's really, really fun. So I hope that gives you sort of a sense of of what I mean when I talk about it as an art form, right? The creative process, somewhat like a comedian, the live process, somewhat like a movie director, somewhat like an OSHA, an OSHA inspector. You're trying to keep everyone safe. So you have these hats that you put on, right? You have these different hats that you put on. And when you do it well, when you do it really well, the weird thing is, it's like you disappear. Because if you do it well, your people who have come up on stage, they really truly become the stars of the show. And that's another thing that I think a lot of stage hypnotists don't get. A lot of us who get into entertainment, myself included, you get into entertainment for your own ego to some extent, right? You get in because you want to be on stage and you want to have people tell you you did well and you did something great. If you're going to get into stage hypnotism, you can do it so that you can be up on stage and you can be working the mic and hamming it up and get your fair share of attention. Absolutely. I think if you really want to be a great hypnotist, you need to approach it from, you've done your job well when they really don't even notice that you're there. It is something special, man. When you can get these people, normal, everyday people, not comedians, not trained actors, normal, everyday people, to transform on your stage and really shine and be the stars of an entertainment event. And then when it's done and they come out of hypnosis, they go right back to being those normal, everyday people. And it's a huge part of what makes stage hypnotism have such an impact with the audience. When they get to watch their partner, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their son, their daughter, their best friend, whoever, when someone watches someone that they have a relationship with transform on stage like that, it's a really special thing. And that is the potential of what you have to give to other human beings. We're going to talk about that more in our final webinar. We're going to talk about the heart of stage hypnotism, and I'll talk more about that. I don't want to digress into that too much, but that's a little tease there. It's really, I feel like I have the best job in the world, and I know there's enough work for all of us, and so I want to help more people get into this profession because I think we can do great things and we can help the overall profession of hypnotism with stage hypnotism if we do it right. And I want to be part of that. So I hope some of you will join me on that journey, but more about that later. So when you talk about the art of it, another part of the art form that's really functional is you need to be pretty good. Maybe not in your whole life in every way, but as a hypnotist, you need to be pretty good at multitasking. Because again, what I've said is you need to manage, always be keeping an eye on safety issues. You need to be assessing what's happening hypnotically with people all the time. Sometimes people lose focus and you got to get rid of them. Sometimes people aren't even hypnotized. They're being socially compliant. You have to learn how to identify that and get rid of them. Some people are hypnotized, but it's very, very light, and you're not going to be able to do good things with them. So if your numbers are low, maybe you keep them, but you got to make sure you don't give them something that they're going to fail at. Makes them look bad, makes you look bad. There's a lot of assessment things that go on in stage hypnotism. You have to keep a sense of your timing. Are you on schedule? You have to think about how you're going to choose who gets what. You know, when you do individual things, who are you picking for that based on, again, the level of complexity of the thing you're trying to do and which people are most suited to do that. How do you manage group scenarios? Group scenarios can be really, really funny because of how much stuff is going on. Sometimes it's kind of like pandemonium, but it should be organized chaos is what it really should be. And your job is to manage that because they're having a hallucinatory experience. And they can't manage it. They're just experiencing it. That's the way it is. So it's your job to manage that. So you got to be the hypnotist. You got to be the comedian. You got to be the director. You got to be the OSHA inspector all at once and do all those things. So it comes with time. It's not something that I think you should necessarily, if you're thinking about getting into stage hypnotism, it's not something that you have to think right now, can I do that, yes or no? Do you feel like you're willing to learn how to do that? You can learn it, you can acquire it. It's really a cognitive process. We all have a certain amount of working memory space. The more you train as a hypnotist and you're able to do things without having to think about doing them so much, the more you routinize your activities, the less working memory space you'll take up, and therefore the more working memory space you'll have to devote to these other things. So while at first when you're starting in hypnotism, you feel like you can only keep one plate spinning, that's all you can do. As you get more and more good at it, you can start spinning a second plate and a third plate and a fourth plate. And eventually you have like 5 or 6 plates spinning in your mind with these different elements of the show. And that's something that we work on. And mostly it's just kind of putting in your time. You got to practice and practice and practice, but something to consider. So the other aspect of the art of stage hypnotism, and it's another one that I don't see a lot of, but production value, okay? If you're gonna get into stage hypnotism, I think one consideration that needs to happen more than ever, and it's just not in our industry, is what level of production value would you be willing to bring to your stage hypnotism show? You know, if you'll allow me to digress a little bit, because I'll try to give you the quick version of this, but when I got trained in 2004, I got trained as a consulting hypnotist. I wanted to have a really firm foundation in hypnotism before I got into stage work. But I knew I was going to get into stage work right away. So by the time I got my consulting hypnotism certification done, I mean, I had earned a master's degree and a bachelor's degree before I got into hypnotism. Now I got my certification. I was like, I can figure out the stage hypnotism part. It slowed my learning curve to not go and train with someone directly, but I did it, right? If I had to do it over again, I don't think I would do it that way, but I did it at the time, you know? So I had an instinct pretty early on that the more I looked at shows, I went around and saw every show I could. I watched videos online. I started joining, even before I got my certification done, I had already joined multiple online discussion forums for hypnotism. And what I found was that when it came to stage hypnotism, there was very little, quite frankly, there was practically no discussion of anything new and groundbreaking in hypnotism in the stage world. And first I thought, well, maybe I'm just expecting too much. Maybe I'm being impatient. And I kept looking for it. I kept looking for it. And finally, because I thought to myself, you know, like, what was everybody? It seemed like everybody was doing the same thing. And I'll always remember this. So finally, I went onto an online discussion forum one day, and I wrote politely what I'm trying to explain right now. I said, listen, it just seems to me like everybody's pretty much doing slightly different variations of the same thing. What do you think is the next thing in stage hypnotism? Where's the future of stage hypnotism? How's it going to grow? How's it going to evolve? How's it going to change for the better? And literally for the first 24 hours, nobody answered me. There was like crickets. And then finally, someone did answer me, and they said, well, you know, it was very polite, a little bit evasive. Well, you know, I think one of the things about stage hypnotism is there really is nothing new to do. It's been around long enough that pretty much like everyone's doing these slight variations of the same thing because it's all been done before. And I went back at the person politely and I said, I get what you're saying, and that's what I recognize. That's totally what I see. But I just don't think that's good enough. I think that all art forms have the ability to grow and change over time. And if we're going to say that we have an art form here, it should do that somehow. Somehow. I don't know how yet because I'm new to it, but somehow. So then another person answered, and they said, yeah, it's hard because, you know, people want to see certain things. And this was another very fair point. He said, you know, people want to see certain things. Like when you go to see a magician, and you expect to see them pull a rabbit out of a hat or saw a lady in half. There are traditional things that are part of a stage hypnotism show that people just sort of want to see, they expect to see. And I said, to that I replied, absolutely, you're right. But why can't there be balance? Why can't there be like, here's some of the traditional stuff, and here's something that I hope you've never seen before. I made this new thing. Maybe someone somewhere has made it in the history of hypnotism, and I just haven't heard of it. But as far as I know, I made this new thing, and I want to share it with you. And there was kind of silence again. And then the thread just basically died, and no one else interacted with it. And then the most interesting thing happened. Privately, 2 people messaged me and said, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I can't find anyone anywhere that's really willing to do something about this. I think we have an issue in the stage hypnotism industry. It's a long time human issue. It's the copycat issue. I think that in any art form, when you do something that's innovative, there are a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people who find it easier to simply, what we call model, to model what you've done rather than do their own innovation. I guess that's part of how people are, and that's like, what are you gonna do? I'm not advocating that we all crusade to eliminate that. But I do think if you're gonna get into stage hypnotism, here's the thing. As I said in an earlier webinar, there are more stage hypnotists out there than ever before. The amount of work isn't really growing. It's, slowly growing. There's plenty of work out there for everyone. There really is. There's high schools and colleges and corporate events and fairs and campgrounds and cruise ships and casinos, and it goes on, right? There's plenty of work out there, but there's more and more people competing for it. And if you want to be able to do this art form, you're going to have a way to represent yourself as an artist differently than your peers. Now, as much as I believe that when I just said it, I recognize that there is no such thing as a singular truth often, right? So what I think is what I would tend to want to promote, I do recognize that also you can just carbon copy someone else's act and probably get away with it to some extent. But what I find is the people that are doing that, they only get away with it for a little while. They make a little bit of money for a little while, and then they fade out. I think if you really want to get into stage hypnotism, you should be prepared to honor some of the traditional bits and aspects of the art form, and you should be ready to challenge yourself to develop new and different content pieces that you can really claim as your own, and that you can say, I made that, and I want to share it with you, and where you can really describe to people why your show is different from other people's shows. You have to be able to articulate it. And that was a big change for me that it took. I learned it the hard way, really, is what I did in my early years was I tried to do my own original bits, but my overall arc of my show was very traditional. I kind of did what most hypnotists do for a show, and I got to a point where I had an agent. I had gotten good enough that I had an agent. I was traveling nationally, but I wasn't working as much as I wanted to. So finally I had a sit-down meeting with my agent. And I said, I'm a big boy. I can take it. What do I got to do? I want to work more. And he said, look, you're a good guy and people like working with you. So that's a plus. He says, we've kept your price point on the lower side of the spectrum, right? He's like, you're not a bargain hypnotist, but you're not expensive either. We've got you well-placed price point wise. He said, so that's another plus. He said, after that, he's like, how do I sell you? He goes, when my people, I have 5 agents technically, there's a whole staff. He said, when my people call and they're trying to tell someone why they should hire you, what are they supposed to say? I had never really thought of that before. And he goes, Paul, he goes, don't take this the wrong way. There's nothing special about your show. He says, you're a good hypnotist. You do a good, standard, traditional hypnotism show. But there's nothing special about your show. That hurt a little bit, but I knew he was saying it from a place of caring. And so I said, I took that right away and I said, okay, what do we do about that? And he goes, we need to generate something with you that no one's ever seen before. And so we sat down and we talked about it. And what we did was we created a model for stage hypnotism that, to the best of my knowledge, no one has ever done before. You know, people tend to talk about hypnotism as interactive. It's interactive. It's not really. I mean, you get people up out of the audience and they get on stage, so there's interaction there. But once they're on stage, what other interaction is there really, right? They're pretty much done. So my agent, God bless him, said, I think you should create a really, truly interactive stage hypnotism show. Okay. So what I ended up doing after a lot of brainstorming was I created a hypnotism show where the audience gets remote controls and the choices for what can happen on stage are put on a big video screen during the show. And the audience gets to vote on what they want to see happen. So the audience determines the arc of the show, not me. Now I've planned all the options, so I'm ready for everything. But any given night, that arc can have a totally different shape than the night before because they get to vote on what they want to see. My business doubled in the first year. I started getting national showcases. I captured, everything I could on tape, and I put it up on YouTube. Some of you probably seen my YouTube channel. I actually have 3 YouTube channels at this point. But it got to a point where that really inspired everything. And then so my business doubled, and then it went up the second year, it still went up again, and everything changed for me. I started touring regularly. I tour all the time now. About anywhere from 60, 65 to 85 dates a year. And because I started putting up those videos and people saw that I was really doing something different, that's what opened the doors for me to get, I got to perform for Whatever USA, which was Bud Light's big campaign where they took over an entire town for 3 days in Colorado. And, I was there with like Vanilla Ice and Casey and the Sunshine Band and all kinds of acts for 3 days. And I got to do street hypnosis one day, and I had a theater all to myself one night, and I got to do a theater show. So I had 2 different performances over the 3-day period. And that was an amazing opportunity for me. And it was because I had demonstrated my concept through video. And the people at the talent agency that Bud Light had hired were like, this is what we want. We want something that's clearly different. And so, you look at other examples of that, and some of them may seem corny to you, like the hypnotist that had the dog, and they went on Britain's Got Talent, and the dog hypnotized Simon Cowell. I know you may or may not have seen that. And some people may make fun of that and go, that's stupid. Look, it's different. And that person has been working with that concept for a while, and they get results with it. If you want to have a hypno dog, more power to you. I think as long as the animal is being treated ethically and you're treating your people ethically on stage, why not? Why not try something different? And there are different ways to do that. And I just think it's worth thinking about. When you start out early, you can't innovate right away. First, you need to learn how to do it. You need to spend your time sort of paying your dues and earning your chops and stuff. Fine, but for the long term, profit process, like think about the idea of you want to take your art form to a different place, even if it's just a little bit different. You don't got to reinvent it completely, but I think that would be helpful. So listen, I'm at the 30-minute mark, and that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for tonight to give you things to think about. Stage hypnotism as an art form. I want to catch up on some questions that people have asked, especially people who've been catching up on the replays. So, excuse me. So the first question is, let's see, what happens when people talk back to you? That's a funny question. I never really thought. You mean like sort of like mouth off to you, maybe, Elizabeth? I don't know. So here's the deal. People ask me questions when I talk with people about what I do for a living. People ask me questions a lot about what happens if you get people misbehaving on stage and stuff. I got to tell you, I've been doing this for over a decade now, and I hypnotize over 1,500 people a year, and I perform for over 15,000 people a year. And people are really good. People are nice. People are kind. They come to these events wanting to be entertained. Once in a while, I've had a drunk come up, at a college or a nightclub event or something, and they think they're going to be funny and stuff, and you just usher them off. I've had maybe like 2 times ever that I've been heckled. I've handled that. I don't really get, in terms of like something like this, like what happens when people talk back to you. Yeah, I don't think I've ever really had that. I think what's more often what happens is sometimes you just get people that are weird, man. Like sometimes, like hypnosis really just sort of strips away our consciously applied filters and protection mechanisms, right? So we all learn how to behave properly, right? And sometimes when hypnosis affects people, it takes all that away, and you get a little view into what they're really like. And sometimes they're just freaks. So sometimes you have to deal with that, of like just having a freaky person, a weird person on stage. And then what that often does is it appears as if someone is purposely being foolish or faking or something. But what I've learned over time is, no, they're just a strange person. So, so let me go to the Twitter feed and see what's going on with Twitter. Sorry I couldn't answer that more, Elizabeth, but I just haven't really had a lot of people. I can't think of anyone ever really talking back to me. Unless I create a scene in which they're supposed to get worked up and talk back to me. I do that sometimes, and then it's part of it anyway, so I'm just having fun with it. Let's see. Oh, here we go. What does a successful high school stage hypnotism strategy look like? This is a great question. So if you want to have a successful high school stage hypnotism strategy, first of all, there's more than one, okay? But I will tell you unequivocally, the best one that I've ever had, and I'm actually creating this as a product that I'm going to sell to stage hypnotists in the next month or two. So come back and check it out. But I'll give you the skinny on it right now. So what I've had tremendous success with is high school fundraiser programs. Now, if you're going to work with high schools, you can do an after prom lock-in. They do these chem-free lock-in nights to keep the kids safe so they're not out drinking and driving. They do them after the prom, and they do them after their graduation. So 2 of your primary ways to get gigs with high schools are to do lock-ins. You can target prom committees to do lock-ins. You can target project graduation committees to do lock-ins. And I've done those, and those are fine. But what I get a lot more happiness from is doing fundraiser programs, because you can make money while knowing that you're helping the student groups make money. Not counting what I've been paid, just in pure profit for the student groups, I have helped student groups raise over $140,000 just by me. And what you do is you set up a fundraiser program where I do something. Again, I've always been like, put your money where your mouth is, or put your, not money, I guess, but anyway. So what I do is, a lot of hypnotists will charge student groups a flat fee for a show. For my fundraiser program, what I do is I say, I'm so convinced that I can help you make money, I will not charge you an upfront fee. I will do a 50-50 split of the ticket revenue with you. And as an added incentive for you to work hard and get great attendance, I will ceiling my side of that 50-50 split at $1,200. And anything, so when the gross hits 2,400, they take 1,200 and I take 1,200. Everything after that 2,400 gross point, they keep. I've had schools make $5,000 in a night. That's a big deal for them. It's a big deal for me to be able to go in. And what you do is you confine that program to a geographic area that you feel comfortable driving to, so that even though that 1,200 is a little bit lower of a price point for you, right? What I'm doing is I'm usually driving like an hour and a half. I do the show. I don't get a hotel. I don't have to have a plane flight. It's like $20 in gas to make $1,200. How can I not be happy with that? And I know I help the student group make money. So what you have to do in order to do that is first you have to define what your geographic area is that you're willing to operate within. So for me in New Hampshire, it actually covers southern Maine, a little bit of northern Massachusetts, and even a little tiny bit of eastern Vermont, right? I do a 2-hour drive window circle around my home. Then you go to the State Department of Education website for each individual state, and they have the listings of all their schools with their addresses. And you build a mailing list for all the schools that are within your perimeter, right? You take that mailing list, you print up your own mailing labels. I do. I find it to be more cost effective because it's a small batch. It's not the kind of thing that's so big that you're going to send it to a print shop. And if you do, they're going to whack you on price because it's a low level of prints. Then you design a direct mail piece which actively sells the fundraiser program. It doesn't just put you out there as a hypnotist. It's you designing a piece. And in my program that I'm going to sell, we have demo pieces and templates and stuff, and it teaches you how to do that. But so you sell that direct mail piece to them and you tell them how you can help them and everything. And then you have some kind of a closure mechanism. They either go to your website and they watch one final video that explains a little bit more information about the program, and then they call you, or you just have them call you. You have a thing set up on the direct mail piece where the call to action is to call you. And then you do an interview. And when you do the interview, you make sure that you take away all their fear and that they feel confident about having basically no risk. That's what you're trying to do, is show them there's no risk. You can't lose money because there's no flat fee. I'm going to give you this, and this to help you succeed. I'm not telling you that, am I? But there's things you can do that, you know, will help them succeed. And you provide that to them. And you give all that stuff. And then when you've taken away all that fear, they just do it. They do it. And then you go in and you make them a bunch of money. And I have schools that I've been working with for 8 years now in a row, probably. You know, I didn't get started with a fundraiser program right away. It took me a couple years. But I have some schools that are like at the 8 or 9 year mark now. And they've made thousands and thousands of dollars with my fundraiser program. And we just keep growing it slowly but surely. Other schools hear about it and they add on. And what I do is I target it in the times of year when I know my college gigs go down. There's certain times a year where colleges aren't looking for entertainment as much. And so I really target my high school fundraiser program to fill those gaps so that I don't feel any slower. My college stuff goes down, but then I've got fundraiser shows to fill it and I'm still busy. And then you can take that process and you can repeat it with different direct mail design for the prom events, for the grad events. And next thing you know, you've got a whole high school program that's built in. You're just rinsing and repeating the process over and over again. It's really easy. It's really easy. And it's nice too. It's fun. It's good. So I hope that answers your question, Jeff. Let's see. We have another question. What are the most specific training needs to be able to feel fully trained, and about how much would these training courses cost? So overall, what is the approximate cost to become a professional? Thank you, Elizabeth, for your kind words after that. So typically stage hypnosis training, and let me be transparent, this webinar series is to get coverage to me so that maybe you'll want to train with me. You know, the webinars are free. I want to bring value to you, but I am, at the end of all of this, I'm going to say, would you like to train with me? I mean, you probably knew that, right? So I'm not going to talk about that now, because that's not what this time is for. I'm going to answer this question without trying to sell. I really don't want to do that. I'll do that later, when I've fulfilled my promise to you that I would give you guys this Q&A time. So typically, you're looking at, training is going to run you anywhere from like $1,000 on the low end to, you know, I haven't, since I haven't had to train anymore, I don't know what the current, like some people, you know, doing big individual training might be more. Mine's up there. We'll talk about that later, but there's a good reason for that. I think the key is if you have prior hypnotism certification, that helps a lot. If you've got that foundation from a like performer standpoint, the only state in the United States right now that I'm aware of that has any kind of prohibition or requirements around stage training, there was something weird going on with Nevada for a while. I'm not sure if it's been resolved yet or not, but to my knowledge, I should brush up on this, but I check on it every so often. You don't have to have a license to do stage hypnotism. And certification is just a credential that says you trained. Okay, so let's be honest. I say you should get certified so that you know you've got training, but you could just start going out there and you could tell people you want to do hypnosis shows without a certificate. So hopefully they're going to ask you, like, do you have training? But a lot of people won't. If you people don't always think that way. For your sake, you should go through a training program that I would say is at least 50 hours of training. There are these weekend programs, right? Go in for a Saturday and Sunday and you're a stage hypnotist. It freaks me out. I don't know. I don't feel good about that. You need to know your basics of hypnotism, your fundamental, not even basics. You need to know more than basics. You need to know your fundamentals of hypnotism. You need to know about safety. You need to know, for your own sake, about contracts and riders. You need to know about the marketing, right, to some extent. And I'll tell you, I hope you guys have hung out with me enough and heard me to get a sense of my authenticity and know that I want to contribute to my profession. And I just think it's time for us to raise the bar with the way that stage hypnotists get trained. It really is. Like, this weekend stuff has got to stop. Like, what I have seen and heard from talking to other people over and over again is you go in, you do your training, you get your certificate, and then it's totally a trial by fire. You're left on your own to figure out, how do you get gigs? How do you negotiate contracts and prices? All that kind of stuff. So it's not just the hypnotism training. Of course, that's the foundation of it all, right? But you really need to know various induction models. You should know suggestibility tests. You should know how to assess subjectively and objectively depth. And then you should have some help in how to deliver suggestions, how to phrase them from a linguistic standpoint, how to deliver them to people in a way that's effective. You should absolutely have training. It should not be taken for granted, the safety issues on stage. That's so important, especially in today's litigious society that we live in. First of all, for the safety of the people who have put their trust in you and come on stage, you have to know how to keep them safe. And second of all, to protect yourself from lawsuits as much as possible. You can never guarantee you're never going to have a lawsuit. You want to help yourself prevent it as much as possible. So I think, Elizabeth, to answer your question, I mean, you should be ready to spend a significant amount of money, and put in at least 50 hours of training. And then what I really think is you want to have a mentor. You want to have someone that you can keep working with in some kind of a mentor-mentee relationship once your training is done, so that you're not just left out to flounder on your own, in the world. And, well, good luck, kid, figure it out. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. So I hope that gives you some things to think about. We have another question. Yay. Thank you for all this information. Oh, it's really just a comment. Oh, good. Thanks, Raquel. All right, we'll check the Twitter feed again. You guys got a chance, you can jump over. You can tweet me at Ramsey Media LLC, RAMSAYMEDIA LLC. That's my Twitter handle. Or you can just leave a comment in the comments area on this host page where the video is being shown. And if you're catching this on a replay, you can do that on a replay too. And I'm not going to be hanging out here constantly to answer it, but I'll get to it eventually. I'll get to it and I'll fill it out, or I'll save it for tomorrow's webinar, the 4th webinar. All right. Sweet. How do you get rid of people on stage who are not good subjects without making it look awkward? Simple, so easy. All you do is sometimes you just calmly say to them, a lot of times what I do is I just say, you're all set for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. You can head on back to your seat now. And they'll just calmly leave, right? Or the other thing you can do is sometimes you'll get people, again, the weird ones and the freaks kind of, you'll get people who they either were never hypnotized and you've sussed that out pretty early on and you need to get rid of them, or they were hypnotized but they're weird and they're just going to be trouble, so you need to release them and let them go. Either way, when you go to let them go, like I had a lady once who was like, no, I want to stay with you. I want to stay with you. She just so badly wanted it. I was like, no, love, you've got to go now. It's time to go. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much. No, I want to stay with you. And I say, no, that's okay. And all you got to do is they just want some love and some attention. So what I find is if I turn to the audience and I say, wasn't she great? She was great. Give her a big round of applause. Show her some love. And everyone claps, and when they get that, they just leave. They're like, okay, people like me, and they just sort of leave. So it's most people are great about it. They don't want to draw negative attention to themselves, and they don't want to be in the way, and they don't want to cause problems. So typically, and what I've done is you start to learn over time. Again, this is part of what I do train people on. You start to learn over time. Some people will go into hypnosis and they'll like it so much and they'll go so deeply and they're enjoying it so much, they don't want to do anything. So they're fantastic hypnotic subjects, but they just want to sort of sit and bask in the warm glow of hypnosis, Well, it's my job to entertain people. I got to get rid of them. And that's what happens sometimes. So there's these different things you learn where, you just learn to remind yourself it's nothing personal. You have a duty to the people who came to your show to put on the best show you can for them. And that's all you're trying to do. You're trying to keep everyone entertained. You gave the person a fair chance to come up on stage. They had their chance. And even maybe they didn't go into hypnosis, and that's okay. Or maybe they did go into hypnosis and they got to have that experience for a little while. That's great. And then you just let them go. And you go back and you make sure you say something kind. You make sure you say something nice. I almost always say, you did great tonight. You're just not quite where I need you to be. I say some slight variation of that almost every time. You did fantastic tonight. You're just not quite where I need you to be to keep you in the show at this point. Thank you so much. And they usually go, oh, okay. And they go. And they don't like get upset. They're cool about it. They're real cool. So, all right. Well, that looks like it for tonight. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow is our 4th and final webinar. Actually, it's not our final webinar. It's the 4th in the series. Yeah, it's our 4th webinar. It is. I don't know what I'm talking about. I have a follow-up video that you're going to receive, but tomorrow's the 4th webinar. And in tomorrow's webinar, we're going to talk about the heart of stage hypnotism. We talked about the business of stage hypnotism, the science of stage hypnotism. Tonight, the art of stage hypnotism. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about the heart of stage hypnotism. It's the final one. It was listed for a 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Something has come up for me, and I need to move it to the evening. So it's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. I know I haven't changed it on the website yet. I will. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the heart of stage hypnotism. I hope you'll come back and join me. I hope you'll ask a bunch more questions. I love having you guys here. I'm so excited to launch this for the very first time. And I'm just really grateful that you spent this time with me. And I hope you've enjoyed the other videos and tonight's. Please keep asking questions. And that's it, I guess. All right. Thanks so much. I'm Paul Ramsey. Be well.